Us Blender users have a great responsibility. We need to provide people with their Christmas renders, or else you know what will happen. That's right. All these photoshoppers will steal the show once again. No can do, sir. It's finally time for us Blender enders to unite to show these photo bashing noobs how it's really done. But all jokes aside, I'll actually teach you some valuable stuff to make cinematic, photorealistic Christmas renders. So let's go! Starting off with the GiftBox. Make sure to use a bevel on it, because it will look more real. The lighting bleeds more on the edges, giving it that cinematic edge light we all crave. Make the top part using a curved path and add some geometry to it. For the textures, we're just going to Google it and write Christmas wrapping paper, and you'll get tons of cool patterns to use on your model. Cube project it and scale the UVs to your liking. I also added an ambient occlusion by making an extra principled BSDF and turning the color to black. Bring in the ambient occlusion and use it as a factor on the mix shader. Now we have some extra dark shadows on the edges, and that looks a lot better. At this point in the render, I was thinking about making a toy figure that looks up at a giant gift box, but I threw that idea out of the window because I actually wanted to make a reindeer and a sleigh. Now, if you want to make a sleigh, use an image from Google as a reference. Then bring in a cube to slice it in half and place a mirror modifier on it. And make sure to follow the lines as you're modeling along. It really is as simple as it sounds. Just follow along with the video if you're having a hard time. It's mostly just scaling and moving around vertices, rotating, whatever. To make the bottom, simply use some cubes and follow the reference like we did before. If you want to make it look even softer, simply put a subdivision surface modifier on it. Then crease the edges using Shift E in order to make the edges a bit harder again. We're going to add a cylinder and model the top part now. While we look at that, let me give you some facts about Christmas that you've probably never heard before. First of all, Christmas is the birthday of Jesus Christ, of course, but Christmas also was a holiday before the coming of Christ. This holiday, in Northern Europe at least, was called Yule. Pagans, specifically in Europe, brought an evergreen tree into their home, just like we do with Christmas trees right now. The Romans celebrated the Saturnalia, where they would be free to drink, gamble and hold festivities throughout Rome. It could be seen as a behavioral free pass, and people were more or less allowed to do a lot of things they normally wouldn't. They also gave each other gifts, just like we still do. The balls we hang in our trees might be based off apples, which were used as decoration. Santa Claus is based on a Christian monk or bishop named Saint Nicholas. In the Netherlands, we have a special holiday based on this man on the 5th of December called Sinterklaas. There's actually an interesting story of which we are not sure whether it's true, but Saint Nicholas might have slapped someone on the face as he turned mad because of his opponent's ideas. The person was called Arius, now known from the Arian heresy. But I'll spare you any stories on the Trinity, Saint Antonius and the Council of Nicaea for that matter. Anyway, Santa Claus might have slapped someone on the face. So the next time you're sitting with your family and someone says something you don't like, just remember, think about what Santa does. The Santa Claus we know nowadays is based on the story of Clement Clarke Moore, who wrote The Night Before Christmas, a short poem. And here are some lines. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below. When, what to my wondering eye should appear, but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. By the way, my previous video where I recreated a painting performed quite well, but we're just 2 likes short of 100 likes. It would be a great Christmas gift to reach 100 likes on this video, and maybe even 1,000, who knows. There's a Dutch saying and it goes like, no you have, but yes you can get. So click on that like button so we can reach the 100 likes on this video. As you can see, I tried out different texturing methods. I tried to take the original reference image and project it from view, but it didn't look as good as I thought because there were highlights in the picture itself. So eventually I decided to make a procedural texture, but later on in the video you'll see that I'm going to mix the procedural texture with another wrapping paper texture and it looks way better. So going back to Blender, I reimagined the scene. I saw a moon and stars, a sleigh pulled by reindeer towards the night sky. So I brought in the stars, drew in images as planes from some stars, and I made the moon using a UV sphere with an image texture of the moon. I made sure to place it into the emission shader so it can give off some light as well. I then tried imagining the landscape. I saw a little house with some lights coming through, as if Santa just delivered the gifts. but I dropped this idea later on as I got something better. In this stage, I was just busy imagining the scene, looking at it and just wondering where everything should be placed and how I want it to look, and then trying to replicate my fantasy onto the screen. I made the snowy fields by bringing in a plane, using a subdivision surface modifier with a strength of 8. For the displacement texture I used clouds, which is fine most of the time. I increased the depth and played around with the strength of the modifier to decide how much hills I actually want. For the texture I made a noise and a Musgrave, combined them and placed it into the height of the bump. Then, as I wanted the top parts to be a bit more reflective, I added a geometry node and used the pointiness slot to determine the height. I plugged that into the roughness so that the top parts of the snow were more reflective than what lays below. And now it's time for the reindeer, which changed the entire render. I first used some meta balls to block out the shape of the reindeer. This allows me to get a pretty decent beginning without doing too much work. As soon as I've got that all in place, I will sculpt the reindeer and make sure it looks a lot better. I'm not really good at sculpting, but I know a thing or two, and I made sure that it just looks like a reindeer enough for the render to work. I mainly use the draw, grab and snake hook brushes, while occasionally smoothing out some low poly areas. I use dynamic paint on constant and set the detail to something like 20 in the beginning. This is quite a meditative process and I'm just going to let it play out. And in the meantime, we can listen to a Dutch Christmas song, because why not? It's my video.
De herdertjes lagen bij nachten, ze lagen bij nacht in het veld. Ze hielden vol trouwen de wachten, ze hadden hun schaapjes geteld. Daar hoorden zij het engelen zingen, hun liederen vloeiend en klaar. De herders naar Bethlehem gingen, het liep tegen het nieuwe jaar. Toen zij er te Bethlehem kwamen, daar schoten 3 stralen dooreen. Een straal van omhoog zij vernamen, een straal uit het kribje beneden. Toen vlamde een straal uit hun ogen en viel op het kinderke teer. Zij stonden tot schreien bewogen en knielden bij het kindje neer.
To make the antlers of the reindeer, I made a separate object and used the snake hook to create some interesting looking shapes. To make it all seem a little bit more random and natural, I made sure to have both sides of the antler look different, and I also made certain parts thicker than others to remove any sign of digitalness. Now it's time to have a look at the composition to see whether I start to like it and whether it's worth finishing the reindeer at all. Maybe I don't think the reindeer looks cool enough and I want to change the entire render. I brought in a new camera and played around with different angles and I picked the one I liked the most. I almost changed the entire idea, but decided to go for the original but with a different touch. Since I like the reindeer, I decided to give it some hair, because it can be cold on the North Pole and no reindeer should be left naked and afraid. With regard to the hair particle system, I made a vertex group so the hairs won't show up on the eyes and antlers. I didn't change a lot of the settings, I simply used some parting, clumping and random roughness in the settings. But for the most part, it was about combing the hairs into the right direction, giving some parts more length than others. Add some hairs, remove some hairs, you know the deal. And as you can see, the feet of the reindeer were the worst part, so I made sure those weren't visible at all in the final render. For the hair texture, I used two colors divided by a procedural texture to give a bit more color detail on the hairs. I didn't use the hair BSDF for some reason, but it looks fine. In the end, lighting makes or breaks the render. If you light the reindeer head on, it looks like garbage. But if you give it an edge light and leave some shadows, it looks pretty good for what I'm going for. I've reached 1000 subscribers recently, so thank you all for that. I truly appreciate everybody watching, liking, commenting. And I love doing YouTube as a passion, even though it doesn't rake in the big pesos, the rusty rupees, the donkey kick dollars. But I enjoy doing it a lot, so thanks for making that possible, everybody. It's nice to see my channel grow so fast now with over 150 subscribers per month. It would be nice to reach 10,000 before the end of next year. We'll see. You gotta have goals, so subscribe. And by the way, if there's anything you see in the video and you're like, hey, I want a tutorial for this, just let me know in the comments and I'll make a video about it. But first, let's watch me comb a reindeer. That's not something you hear every day. As you can see, the feet didn't work out quite as well, but it's not a big problem because I decided to hide it in the final render by placing some snow in front of it. The eyes are just base colors. Here you can see me trying out different camera angles once again, trying to find that sweet spot where I feel like it might actually look good. I pretty much always use the depth on the camera to get some nice bokeh. This makes your render look more cinematic. Now came the time to add some stuff to the scene, because it's all still a bit empty. I decided to place an igloo and distribute some random gift boxes all over the place. It also needed some pine trees to fill up some empty spaces. I used the particle system to distribute random dead trees, and I also randomized the snowy landscape a bit more, and I made sure that the deer didn't look exactly the same by changing the position of the head and the antlers. Now I thought it would be funny to have some gift boxes fall from the sleigh, either because Santa made a mistake or because that's simply the way he takes off. Which explains why some people get their gifts a day later through Amazon. Once again, randomize the colors of the boxes so they aren't all red. Change the size of some of them as well, because nobody gets the same present. Furthermore, I dropped these boxes using rigid body physics to get a pile of gift boxes on the ground. I then linked all the data to the original gift box so they would inherit its shape and texture. The sleigh definitely needed some more texture work, so I cheaply decided to mix the procedural texture I made with the same wrapping paper as I gave the gift boxes. And it looks better, so I rolled with it. I then played around by scattering some objects to fill up the scene and make it look better overall. Now it's just a matter of randomizing everything, making sure that everything is on its right place, and distribute some random gifts all over the scene. I added a mountain and textured it using base colors, but I made sure to use the same pointiness trick I used earlier in this video so that the mountain tops could be white while the rest could be brown. The mountain isn't very prominent in the picture, so I didn't spend a lot of time on it, nor did I worry about the quality, because you won't notice it anyway. I also added a volumetric to give some more depth to the scene and have some interesting interaction with the lighting. I noticed the reindeer pulling the sleigh were all the same and they were placed in a straight line. I didn't like that at all, so I made sure that the array followed a curve to get a bit more swing. Then I randomized each reindeer separately ever so slightly in order to give the illusion that it's not the same reindeer copied 8 times. I once again distributed some pine trees, but now they have some leaves, and then I went over to lighting. I found the moon to be a bit underwhelming and there's no light on the reindeer in the sky, so that needs some fixing. I used the same black body and spread tricks I always use. Check out my lighting tutorials. And now it's basically just placing the last models and everything into the scene, making sure the composition looks right. I used an area light with a pretty high spread. I wanted to give an edge light to the reindeer and the sleigh and the sky as well, because it doesn't really grab the attention of the scene like it does now. And I like it a lot better when there's a little bit of an edge light over there. Time for some Davinci Resolve. I didn't do anything fancy, I just color graded it using some old tricks that you can see in my How to Make Your Blender Render Better in Davinci Resolve video. And this is the final result. So let me know what you think about this render, what you like and dislike about it, and what I can improve on. And if you want to know how I recreated this painting in Blender, then I highly recommend watching this video next.